Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
We're into Daniel chapter 4, which is quite a long reading, so try and stay with me. Daniel chapter 4. King Nebuchadnezzar, to the peoples, nations, and men of every language who live in all the world, may you prosper greatly. It is my pleasure to tell you about the miraculous signs and wonders that the Most High God has performed for me. How great are his signs, how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an eternal kingdom. His dominion endures from generation to generation. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at home in my palace, contented and prosperous. I had a dream that made me afraid. As I was lying in my bed, the images and visions that passed through my mind terrified me. So I commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be brought before me to interpret the dream for me. When the magicians, enchanters, astrologers, and diviners came, I told them the dream, but they could not interpret it for me. Finally, Daniel came into my presence, and I told him the dream. He is called Belteshazzar, after the name of my God, and the spirit of the holy gods is in him. I said, Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, and no mystery is too difficult for you. Here is my dream. Interpret it for me. These are the visions I saw while lying in my bed. I looked, and there before me stood a tree in the middle of the land. Its height was enormous. The tree grew large and strong, and its top touched the sky. It was visible to the ends of the earth. Its leaves were beautiful, its fruit abundant, and on it was food for all. Under it the beasts of the field found shelter, and the birds of the air lived in its branches. From it every creature was fed. In the visions I saw while lying in my bed, I looked, and there before me was a messenger, a holy one, coming down from heaven. He called in a loud voice, "Cut down the tree and trim off its branches. Strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the animals flee from under it, and the birds from its branches. But let the stump and its roots, bound with iron and bronze, remain in the ground, in the grass of the field. Let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him live with the animals among the plants of the earth. Let his mind be changed from that of a man, and let him be given the mind of an animal, till 7 times pass by for him." The decision is announced by messengers. The holy ones declare the verdict so that the living may know that the Most High is sovereign over the kingdoms of men and gives them to anyone he wishes, and sets over them the lowliest of men. This is the dream that I, King Nebuchadnezzar, had. Now, Belteshazzar, tell me what it means, for none of the wise men in my kingdom can interpret it for me. But you can, because the spirit of the holy gods is in you. Then Daniel, also called Belteshazzar, was greatly perplexed for a time, and his thoughts terrified him. So the king said, "Belteshazzar, do not let the dream or its meaning alarm you." Belteshazzar answered, "My lord, if only the dream applied to your enemies and its meaning to your adversaries. The tree you saw, which grew large and strong, with its top touching the sky, visible to the whole earth, with beautiful leaves and abundant fruit, providing food for all, giving shelter to the beasts of the field, and having nesting places in its branches for the birds of the air, you, O king, are that tree. You have become great and strong. Your greatness has grown until it reaches the sky. and your dominion extends to distant parts of the earth. You, O king, saw a messenger, a holy one, coming down from heaven and saying, "Cut down the tree and destroy it, but leave the stump bound with iron and bronze in the grass of the field, while its roots remain in the ground. Let him be drenched with the dew of heaven. Let him live like the wild animals until 7 times pass by for him." This is the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree the Most High has issued against my lord the king. You will be driven away from people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like cattle and be drenched with the dew of heaven. 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over the kingdoms of men and gives them to anyone he wishes. The command to leave the stump of the tree with the roots means that your kingdom will be restored to you when you acknowledge that heaven rules. Therefore, O king, be pleased to accept my advice. Renounce your sins by doing what is right, and your wickedness by being kind to the oppressed. It may be that then your prosperity will continue. All this happened to King Nebuchadnezzar. 12 months later, as the king was walking on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon, he said, "Is not this the great Babylon I have built as the royal residence by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty?" The words were still on his lips when a voice came from heaven. "This is what is decreed for you, King Nebuchadnezzar. Your royal authority has been taken from you. You will be driven away from people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like cattle. 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over the kingdoms of men and gives them to anyone he wishes." Immediately, what has been said about Nebuchadnezzar was fulfilled. He was driven away from people and ate grass like cattle. His body was drenched with the dew of heaven until his hair grew like the feathers of an eagle and his nails like the claws of a bird. At the end of that time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes towards heaven, and my sanity was restored. Then I praised the Most High. I honoured and glorified him who lives forever. His dominion is an eternal dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the peoples of the earth are regarded as nothing. He does as he pleases with the powers of heaven and the peoples of the earth. No one can hold back his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" At the same time that my sanity was restored, my honour and splendour were returned to me for the glory of my kingdom. My advisors and nobles sought me out, and I was restored to my throne and became even greater than before. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt glorify the King of heaven, because everything he does is right, and all his ways are just. And those who walk in pride, he is able to humble.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
It's really lovely to be with you, and there's a real quality, a earnest integrity to how you are. It's really enjoyable to be among you. So, hopefully things will be appealing. Yeah, how to train your monster is what I thought we'd look at this morning. I guess the first question you ask when you read your Bible is, where are we? And maybe it's helpful to do that. And where we are in this reading is in the centre of civilization. Not everything God does is in a small corner. What happens in this reading happens right in the middle of the civilized world, with the key players that everybody knows. And sometimes when you're asked to compare and contrast, Dallas Willard says the most important subject to be studied at university, often dropped by universities, is comparative religion. The question we need to know is what is real? And from that, what is true? And from that, what is believed? And from that, what is done? If you follow that breadcrumb trail back, comparative religion is the most important subject to be studied. And in the middle of this story, in Babylon, I think it's Iraq today, might be Iran, I think it's Iraq, they've managed to dominate the known world, but they sit on the crossroads of the trade routes between South Asia and Europe and Africa and Russia, right in the middle of where all the trading happens and has to cross. A really important place, unsurprising that it was so prosperous. And once we've figured out where we are, it's probably helpful to think, what are we reading? What is it? It's the book of Daniel. I mean, those of us who've read it, Daniel's a prophet, isn't he? Well, he's also an administrator. That was his job. And not an administrator as you perhaps have in a church, processes all the invoices. An administrator is a government officer who organises how things are done. Daniel was at the top of the tree. Maybe it's about that. Maybe it's history. Maybe it's visionary. What is it? What did we read? Any clues? All of the above. Good answer. Good answer. I'm going to suggest it's this. It's news. It's news. Sometimes what you get on your news programme in television is not news. It's information. There's a storm coming. We need to think about this, or that's coming up. I guess in a sense that's news. But news in its purest form is something important that's happened, and we need to know about it. And not all news is new. Not everything important that's happened that we need to know about has just happened. We're a member of NATO. That was news once. There are nations that aren't members of NATO. And maybe that will become news for them as they join. Maybe there are other alliances that's really important to know about if you live in a country that's under threat. But once upon a time, joining NATO was news here. Now it's a fact. It's information. It affects all of us. Brexit was news. It's a fact. It affects all of us. Some of us it massively upsets. Some of us feel quite pleased. Some are uncertain. Some regret. Some are hopeful. But the reality is, it's a piece of news that affected us all. The thing about monsters is monsters sink. And I want to talk this morning about the road less travelled. There's a book written by M. Scott Peck many years ago now. When he began to write the book, The Road Less Travelled, he wasn't a Christian. He was writing a book about spiritual development. The road less travelled. The road from being a monster to being something else. And he became a Christian as he researched authentic spiritual journeys. And I want to think about the road less travelled this morning. The Bible describes the human heart, and you have one, as deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. What a gift, eh? To receive that. We've all got one. And the Bible, the God of the Bible, invites us to swap that heart of stone for something else. The good news that's contained within the Bible, something that's happened that affects us all, is that it is possible to know what is right and to be empowered to do it. The law, the legal system in this country, might, by making you frightened of consequences, help you to resist doing wrong stuff. But the law is powerless to change you. That change is yours and yours alone. Unless you accept God's offer for a new heart. And then suddenly power becomes available within you to change, to overcome. And for me and for people of my generation, a very important little booklet that many evangelists used in the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s was Journey into Life. And it just shared the basics of how to swap your heart of stone for one of flesh, for one with the life of God in it. The journey into life is the roadway of righteousness. You might have noticed in verse 27 of that beautifully read reading that we had earlier, Daniel says to King Nebuchadnezzar, I wish this was given to your enemies. But if you stop doing your wicked stuff, and if you start caring for the poor, perhaps God will not do this. Daniel can see. He's a seer. He can see. And he knows what's coming. And he's trying to help the king cope with the reality, what is real, that is coming. Well, let's have a look at our monster, shall we? Here he is. So you've read, I understand, the book of Daniel so far, so you've been to chapter 2. Just give you a couple of highlights. I am serious about this. This is Nebuchadnezzar speaking. If you don't tell me what my dream was and what it means, you will be torn limb from limb, and your houses will be turned into heaps of rubble. Nice guy. See why we're talking about monsters? Yeah? In chapter 2, it ends like this. The king Nebuchadnezzar threw himself down before Daniel and worshipped him, and he commanded his people to offer sacrifices and burn sweet incense before him. The king said to Daniel, truly your God is the greatest of gods, the Lord over kings, a revealer of mysteries, for you have been able to reveal this secret. What is real is dawning on our monster. Come to chapter 3, see how much progress he's made. Nebuchadnezzar was so furious that Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego, with them, that his face became distorted with rage. You ever seen that? I have. I've caused that a few times. He commanded that the furnace be heated 7 times hotter than usual, and if you did read, the people who chucked these 3 boys in died from the heat. That is the consequence of rage. To be so furious you want to destroy. The end of that chapter, therefore I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of these 3 boys be cut into pieces, and their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way. Progress, But not much. He's changed targets now. Now it's like people won't help him, so he'll smash them to pieces. Now it's if people disagree with him, he'll smash them to pieces. Still a monster, but not quite so monstrous. So here we are today. He starts off, how can the mystics enable me? Notice that even in the chapter we just read, in the announcement he makes, he's still pantheistic. He believes in everything, doesn't exclude anything. He finds out that what Daniel serves is authentic. It's real. He then goes to, I should be worshipped. And in the humbling experience of seeing people walk through a furnace, observing a fourth person who he knows nothing about, saving them, and watching them come out unsinged, this God is able to thwart my power. And then, I am amazing. Look at me and what I have built is where we are in our story today. The rise to power. What a fellow. But it is time for a reality check. He sent a dream, and one that's really impacted him. He sees this enormous tree, and he sees it being really beautiful and fruitful, and everyone needs it. And then he hears a pronouncement about that tree, and you will have noticed if you listen carefully, it went from what he's seeing to what he's hearing. And what he hears is not it will be cut down, he will be cut down. And that's what troubled him. I think he had a bit of foreboding. See, the centre of the universe is a throne. And on that throne sits someone fit to sit there. And all other rulers are accountable to him. And sometimes, if you're fortunate enough, he sends you a message. And he sent Nebuchadnezzar a very clear message. Nebuchadnezzar was contented and prosperous. He saw this large tree visible to the whole world, lovely leaves, abundant fruit, fed every wild creature and every other creature. Interesting that God observes that human beings who he put in charge of all nature are in charge of all nature. And what we do with our civilizations affects the wild creatures as well as the domestic ones. Cut it to a stump, drench it with dew, give him the mind of an animal. 7 years. It said 7 periods of time. Some Bible translations make it 7 years. Who knows? Doesn't matter. People dream of a better world. Remember this one? I love this dream. Still today. Long dead, but wow. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the colour of their skin, but by the content of their character. Mark, that is a dream of someone who didn't live in a nation like that. Dreaming of justice. That's a good dream. And people dream of a better world. Maybe you dream of a better world. I'm going to suggest that God dreams of a better person. And that's what this dream is all about. God is dreaming of a better Nebuchadnezzar. Because God knows that it is humans that he has given authority to. And he doesn't want to see that authority misused. Why did Jesus come? He came to bring justice to the nations. So when you became a Christian, if you have, you became committed to dying to the way you would have lived as a monster, and living to the way you should live as someone who's following Jesus. And the outcome of that, the evidence that that really happened for you, is simple. It's justice. If your life doesn't manifest justice, it probably didn't happen. I'll say that again because it's massively important. Jesus didn't come to this world so that you would raise your hand in a charismatic meeting or an evangelical meeting and make a decision to take up your offer of a covenant. He came that you would take up that covenant offer and that you would begin to manifest justice. And when you do that, the world becomes a better place, because that is the outcome of God's dream, a better person. So Nebuchadnezzar, on the face of it, is condemned to a rather rough few years, and Daniel doesn't want him to do this. And Daniel, for once in his life, is wrong. Now, Daniel finished well. He's the most flawless of the Old Testament characters. Wonderful guy. Finished well, ran well, served multiple rulers at the top of the administrations. Died well. But on this occasion he was wrong. And I think I've been wrong. Maybe you've been wrong. Maybe you see something coming for someone that you don't want them to live through. And maybe you didn't get why that should happen. Maybe you didn't realise what it would do for them. I wish this was not what the dream means, says Daniel. I wish it wasn't. The fear of the Lord is a good thing. It really is. It's a recognition of the power of God. It's a realization that I must accommodate someone else who's right. That is an appropriate thing. Fear is not always bad. Fear orientates you properly with things that absolutely matter that you must not get wrong. Where we go next? This is the interpretation, Your Majesty, and this is the decree the Most High has issued against my lord, the king. You will be driven away from people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like the ox and be drenched with the dew of heaven. 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and gives them to anyone he wishes. Wowzers. Imagine having to say that to someone. I had words in my mouth last year. I was in danger of being arrested, and all I'd done, I'd brought some water filters into Burkina Faso, and they found them in my luggage. My luggage got lost, and I wasn't with it when it turned up, and the customs inspected it, and they wanted to find out from me how much the filters were worth, so they could charge me for the customs duty of bringing it into the country. And it's a free of charge invoice, it was a gift. So I said, no, customs is my background. So I said, it's a free of charge invoice, there is no value. And they said, well, no, actually, tax is payable on change of ownership, and the real value is needed. And I said, well, I sent out one of those prayers where I've actually now committed a crime by importing something illegally, and these are people who want money out of me. So I said, your government is responsible. So I asked God what to say, and this is what I said. I found myself saying, your government is responsible for keeping your people healthy. Every year, thousands of your people are needlessly sick because their water is filthy. That is your responsibility. You are doing nothing about it. I have come to your country to help your people. I care about them more than you do. And now you want to compound your foolishness by trying to charge me money for helping your people. What are you doing? Well, that went to the highest level of Burkina Faso's Customs and Excise, and they apologised, released the stuff without charge, and said, next time I bring a thing in, would I please tell them in advance so they could give me a credit to bring it in with. I think Daniel felt a bit like I did with his men. This is a guy who tears people limb from limb, turns their houses to rubble. This is not an easy man. A man with no sense of accountability whatsoever. You do not give that kind of message. I felt like that, giving to a quite notoriously bad government, actually, a message like that. Well, let's come back to our road less travelled. Sometimes the path of spiritual growth is a hard one, a really tough one, and you just don't know what it will contain for you. I suggest these are some of the most effective spiritual growth experiences you can go through. You can go through disability. You can go through depression. You can go through something you don't think you've got the strength for. You can go through a terrible diagnosis. You can go through the loss of a job. You can go through a storm of multiple types, including real ones, that rip your fence down. Whatever it is, it may be the right thing for you. I remember we had an absolute shocker over in Folkestone when Mark Stanton died. Well, he actually came to Angela, my wife, who had a nurse someone with motor neuron disease many years before, and he was aware of that. He said to Ange, would you mind nursing me? And she said, well, yes, I would actually. I could, but actually you need very little nursing. What you need is care. And the best people to give you care is the football team you play in. Why don't you ask them to nurse you? So we did. All of us. We had a whole team going and visiting Mark, day after day, week after week. As he got weaker and iller, we began to take over his natural functions for him. We treated his body like our own, and the last few of us slept with him. Well, if you'd asked Mark, where's God in all this, as the wreck of his body containing that lovely man, he would say, well, it's obvious, he's in my friends. Our son's a paramedic today because of Mark Stanton. He found out, I can cope with bodies. I don't mind wiping bottoms. I'm not squeamish. I can deal with this. Maybe I could go into medicine. That's one small byproduct of a very tough 5 years. Did us the power of good. The power of good. And just in case your doctrine of healing is all over the place, God heals, and he doesn't. Every single Christian I've ever heard about, except us lot still alive at the moment, has snuffed it. And at some stage, my friends will gather around me to pray for my healing, and the following day, I'll be dead as a hammer. Make sure your doctrine of healing is connected to reality. We could bring, couldn't we, one of the lepers that Jesus healed in today and interview him. But we couldn't, could we? Because he's dead. Okay? Get a real doctrine of healing. And recognise that sometimes suffering is an important part of development. Well, these are the last words that we read of from King Nebuchadnezzar. Peace and prosperity to you. But friendly. I want you all to know about the miraculous signs and wonders the Most High God has performed for me. How great are his signs, how powerful his wonders. His kingdom will last forever, his rule through all generations. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and glorify and honour the King of heaven. All his acts are just and true, and he is able to humble the proud. He's on his way, isn't he? That's monstrous. And I genuinely believe that God courts every human, even Nebuchadnezzar, even monstrous ones. In working with young people, it's been my life's work to work with young people. I will often ask people for their journey so far. What has God said to you? These will be climbing the walls, non-Christian, don't know God, don't want to know God, teenagers. What's going on between you and God up till now, from your earliest memory? Do you know, everyone has a story. God has spoken to every one of them. I believe that God speaks to every human. And he speaks to you. He's very good at communication. He invented it. And here's your hope. For God knew his people in advance. He chose them to become like his son, so that his son will be the firstborn among many brothers and sisters. God speaks. It's probably the most important thing that can happen to you. The transcendent moment of reality when the living God enters your world. It is unbelievable. Unbelievably true. And when it happens for you, when you get a dream from God, when you see a vision, when God touches you on the shoulder physically, or speaks in an audible voice, it will change you. It will ruin you. Ruin the monster within you anyway. How seriously do you pursue those moments? Is that what you're after? Can I suggest to you, it is the greatest buzz available. The source of all life touches your life and brings you more alive. Would you want anything more than that? Is there anything more valuable? I suggest not. And what's God's agenda for you? That you would become like him. That you would be restored to what a human should be. A human to rule like I do, says God. Let us make man in our image, to do it like us. That's what being a Christian is all about. Becoming more conformed to the likeness of his Son. It's your predestined future. And you can trust God to get you there. And I know it's hard to hear, but prosperity and ease are not the fastest route to spiritual development. They normally cause regression. Hardship and struggle refine you. Don't necessarily think God has departed because this is happening to me. It's more likely God has turned up the heat. I want to invite you to pray with me as we remind ourselves of how important God is and what his agenda for us is. Let's pray. Father, I want to thank you for what you did for this terrible man in the Bible, whose unaccountable abuse of power is well documented, whose immense richness was made on the backs of the poor. And Lord, yet you cared about him. You wanted a better Nebuchadnezzar, and you got it. and observing what you did for him, we want to say this morning, Lord, would you do that for us? Would your dreams about us be realised? We invite you, Lord, to bring your agenda to our lives, to achieve in us real spiritual development. We want the roadway of righteousness. We want justice to flow from us. We don't just want to benefit from it. We want to produce it. So we give you permission this morning, Lord. Bring your agenda to us. Help us grow for your glory in this town. Amen.